Hi. Some of you may recall that in February of 2008, civil society launched two very important documents. The first, the People's Voice. The second, the People's Declaration. Now, both these documents are available on the MCLM website. The People's Voice is a 4-page I don't want list. It essentially summarizes all the ills that we see in this country that we collectively do not want. Race politics, corruption, the emasculation of the institutions of state, the whole lot. Over 4 pages, we summarized the things we didn't want to see in this country. Now, the People's Declaration is a 19-page document. It's literally a wish list. I see that document really as a blueprint for 30 years of nation building. Now, on the 23rd of February 2008, 6 political parties, including the 3 parties that now make up Pakatan Raya, at a ceremony at what was then known as Block House, endorsed the 2 documents as their own. And based on that, so many of us in civil society, Raja Petra, myself, and so many others went to ground, went to Ceramah for the parties that had endorsed that document. Now, 3 years later, we've looked at that document and we've realized that, one, without federal power, so much of it cannot be implemented. Number 2, it's too wieldy. It's too lengthy a document. Now, with that in mind, many of us in MCLM sat down and started to work to see if we could come up with a reform agenda that we felt was doable in 1 term of governance, i.e. 5 years. Now, we've come up with 4 pillars. I was taught in school that Sabah and Sarawak were the 12th and 13th states of the Federation of Malaysia. That's always been my understanding. Last year, February, I attended and I spoke at a forum, in fact at 2 forums, one in KK, Kota Kinabalu, and the other in Kuching. And to my horror, I discovered that the truth might actually be quite different. Now, I have since had the opportunity to look at some documents, including the Malaysia Agreement of 1963 and the 20-point agreement that relates to Sabah. And in fact, there have been some media reports that go back to the date when the Federation of Malaysia was formed, particularly, I think, the Jesselton Times, which does give the impression that Sabah and Sarawak were never intended to be 12th and 13th states within the Federation of Malaysia, that the agreement of 1963 was entered into by the Federation of Malaya, Singapore, then North Borneo, now Sabah, and Sarawak as 4 sovereign independent nations under the umbrella of the Federation of Malaysia. Now, the ramifications of this are quite serious. What it means is Sabah and Sarawak are therefore not the 12th and 13th states, but with Singapore leaving, are now, together with Malaya, the 3 independent nations under the Federation of Malaysia. Now, what we've seen in Sabah and Sarawak over the last 50 years, well, 63, 34, 48 years or thereabout, is a denial then of the people of Sabah and Sarawak the legitimacy as equal 1/3 partners in the Federation of Malaysia. Now, MCLM's proposal, and this is the first reform we have in our reform agenda, is that the new government post 13th general election, if it has the will to commit itself to reforms, is to form a Royal Commission of Inquiry to look into this question of what precisely were the agreements arrived at in 1963 and whether the claim that Sabah and Sarawak were never intended to be the 12th and 13th states but equal then 1/4 partners, and now with the exit of Singapore, 1/3 partners, to look into this and to report back to the Rakyat and to His Majesty what was in fact agreed upon. Number 2, we need to get at the truth. If there is truth that this is in fact the case and that they were never intended to be 12th and 13th states, who hijacked the intent of the agreement then? And most importantly, to report back to the Rakyat and His Majesty as to how, in the shortest possible time, the agreements of 1963 can be honoured. Now, it's important to understand this. We've seen Royal Commissions of Inquiry of late, the Teo Beng Hawk, the V.K. Lingam RCIs, and quite frankly, we are disheartened, we are disillusioned, we have no confidence in those institutions. Not because the institution itself cannot be workable, but we have no confidence in the components that make up the RCI. Therefore, what we are proposing is that the new government establish an RCI made up of individuals who have the confidence of the leadership in Sabah and Sarawak. In 1970, if we look at government statistics, the level of poverty in the country, in Peninsular, Sabah and Sarawak, approximately 50% of the population were categorized as poor. Government statistics, the latest government statistics, would have us believe that 50% in 1970, notwithstanding the increased population, has now been remarkably reduced to 3.8%. Now, if that were true, our Malaysian government would deserve the applause of the entire world. But the reality is this: what the government does is they use a poverty line indicator which is so unrealistic. For instance, the PLI, poverty line indicator that is used for Malaysia, the Peninsula, is 763 ringgit income for a household. For instance, if you, for your family, earn 763 ringgit a month, you would not be categorized as poor. In Sabah, if a household earned 1,048 a month, and we're looking at a household statistically at say 5 persons per household, earn 1,048, that household would not be categorized as poor. Now, you don't need to be an economist to know that those figures are unrealistic. When you raise that PLI to a more reasonable 1,500 ringgit a month, the poverty level in the country as a whole goes up dramatically to almost 40%. Now, this is shocking when you understand that since 1974, we have been an oil-producing nation. And it is estimated that from 1974 to 2009, approximately 2.5 trillion to 3 trillion has passed into the federal coffers. Now, MCLM's main work, our constituency is principally the 40% who are marginalized in this country. Since 1971, this country has had an affirmative program called Dasar Ekonomi Baru, or in English, New Economic Policy. Quite clearly, if we still have 40% of the country who are poor, notwithstanding the wealth that has come into the federal coffers, particularly through the oil and gas industry, something's gone dramatically wrong. Now, let me just very quickly summarize where the problem is with the Dasar Ekonomi Baru. Firstly, it is top-down. Some Ketua Pengarah sits in his air-conditioned office with his task force, having never gone down to the impoverished areas, looks around at other jurisdictions to plagiarize, works out one template. As my colleague Jayanat always says, one shirt to fit all. It doesn't work that way. All right, so the first problem is top-down. Now, the second problem is the implementation. In its process, the huge leakages that we've seen in the entire process. Funds that have been intended to reach the impoverished never get there because it gets hijacked along the way. In short, corruption. The ethnic-based manner in which the policy has been implemented. Now, the MCLM proposes what we call the social inclusion agenda. The first thing we would like to reverse is the top-down approach in its operations. What we propose through this program and if it was implemented by a federal authority who has access to national funds, would be that an exercise to go down and to profile and understand the impoverished communities. In short, we don't tell them what they need. We go down and hear from them and find out from them what it is they need to address and overcome the serious problem of leakages that have really drained the funds that were intended for use in the affirmative program Dasar Ekonomi Baru. MCLM proposes that the social inclusion agenda be administered and implemented by what we call provisionally now the Malaysian Social Inclusion Agenda Commission. This commission, we envisage, ought to be manned by men and women of most unquestionable integrity, and we have these individuals in the country. The idea is to take this program out of the hands of politicians, take this program out of the hands of bureaucrats, and leave it to be administered by a commission. Now, this commission will have to publish annual reports which are to be debated in Parliament and, most importantly, made available to us, the Rakyat. The other side of the coin would be that, unlike the current system, the members of Parliament would be directly involved in understanding the needs of their impoverished constituents, in preparing programs and having those programs presented to the Commission for allocations to be approved. And ideally what we see is this: those programs ought to be approved, funds made available, and if programs are declined, the Commission will have to provide reasons. Right? Now, most importantly, I want to emphasize this: as we've said, Dasar Ekonomi Baru was so ethnic-based. We want to do away with race. This entire program has to be based on need. The Commission has to at all times ensure that the allocations are made available on a needs basis. All right? Now, that is essentially the social inclusion agenda. We will want the new federal government coming in to immediately begin this program. We have a legal team that is drafting the necessary bill called the Malaysian Social Inclusion Agenda Commission Bill, with a view to the new government coming in, having this bill ready, and to have the Commission become a reality post the 13G.